global consumption of wool as a product is probably as good as it's been. People are becoming more aware about what they're wearing and what they're wanting to purchase. In the shop front, they're looking for sustainable products and products that are environmentally friendly. Wool is certainly at the forefront of this consumer perception, and we do predict that this will translate into real dollar value back to the farmer. What we think over the next 5 years will be a rebuild stage, probably for the whole Australian merino flock and sheep flock in general. We've got a long way to come back to some more sustainable production levels, but it will be quite difficult to get a gauge on the true market over the next couple of years.
Welcome to the Profitable Farmer podcast, where we share stories and tips to help you run a better farming business and create your very own freedom farm. If you're looking to work smarter and not harder in your farm business, welcome. You're in the right place. G'day everyone. I hope this finds you incredibly well. In this episode, I'm delighted to introduce Jamie and Will Swales to you. It's pretty cool in this Farm Owner Academy journey that we get to make some incredibly strong friendships within our community. And I'd like to just acknowledge that Jamie and Ange Swales have certainly become very good friends to Jane and I, and we value their family greatly. It gives me great pleasure to lean in with Jamie. Ange couldn't join us today, and his son Will, to do a few things today. One is to acknowledge their 150th birthday or anniversary as a sixth generation wool producer, and also to speak to Jamie and Will, who is a wool buyer with Endeavour Wool Exports, just to get their read on what has happened in the wool market and what their outlook is for the future. There's no doubt that the wool industry's had its challenges recently, and there's a view that that might continue. But I thought, who better to call on to speak to what we're seeing in the wool game than a family that's been in it for 6 generations, celebrating their 150th anniversary, and with a son in Will who is leading the charge as a really progressive and successful wool buyer for Endeavour Wool Exports in Sydney. So just to introduce the Swales partnership and Jamie and Ange's farm to you. Jamie and Ange farm Woodlands, which is a 4,265 hectare property, 55 kilometres west of Armidale in the New England in northern New South Wales. Their primary enterprise is superfine merino wool with a first cross overlay and beef cattle. They have 3 children in Will, who I'll introduce now, Georgia and Angus. And they're a family completely dedicated to farming, to their journey with us at FOA, and to all things superfine wool. To introduce Will to you, he is a wool buyer with Endeavour Wool Exports in Sydney, and after graduating from the University of Queensland with his Bachelor of Agribusiness, he's now incredibly passionate about the wool industry and intending to have a lasting career within it. For more information about Endeavour Wool Exports, we'll add that to the show notes. But Jamie and Will, really appreciate your comment on what has played out for wool growers and the wool market. It's really nice to hear some optimism from both of you around the outlook that you predict for especially superfine wool in the future. Jamie, great to have you finally on Profitable Farmer podcast. Great to see you, and congratulations, mate, on 150 years for your family at Woodlands. How do you reflect on that milestone, mate?
Thanks very much, Hutch. It's great to be here, and thanks for inviting us on. Oh, look, it's something we're actually very proud of. It's pretty special for us to have the same farm and the same family for 150 years. So, yeah, we're pretty excited.
Well done, Jamie, as you should be, and we'll really appreciate your time. Understand you've got a brother and a sister equally passionate about agriculture, but it's great to see you still in the industry and leading the charge for the wool industry. And, yeah, great to have you with us today. How are you?
Yeah, well, thanks, Hutch. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure, mate. Jamie, 6 generations. I think your kids will be the 6th generation. Tell us a bit more about the history of the farm and how you describe what it practically looks like today.
It's nothing flash, Hush. 4,000 hectares west of Armidale, and my great-grandparents settled here in 1875, having come all the way from Armidale. Prior to that, they were in Scotland, so they're sort of, that was their journey here way back then. It was obviously fully undeveloped, they were pioneers. It was selected off some squatting leases that were around at the time, and yeah, they wanted more area than they got around Armidale, so they found this block out here. It wasn't virgin scrub; it would have been sort of reasonably open woodland type country. It's pretty steep and rocky, but yeah, they thought it was good wool growing country, and I suppose time's proven it hasn't been too bad at that. And yeah, it survived the generations. It's undergone obviously a lot of fencing and development in 150 years, and it probably doesn't look a great deal different in a lot of parts of it than it did then. Some parts are fully developed, so it's got the full range. Yeah, and that's continual. Each generation does their own bit, and we've been lucky enough that line's continued. Whether or not that happens to keep going as time will tell, I suppose.
A lot's happened even in your lifetime, Jamie. How do you reflect growing up, what it was to grow up on the property, and how much has changed in your lifetime?
Yeah, we obviously grew up here. I had 2 sisters and mum and dad, and then for a period I had my grandmother and 2 aunties as well. So it was a pretty big family gathering around the lunch table on Sunday afternoon, and that pretty much happened every Sunday when we were growing up. So, a very strong family connection. And all I ever wanted to do was to come and work on woodlands. That was my lifetime dream. Probably not fully understanding what all that involved, but that's all I ever wanted to do. And so I suppose I've realised that dream. It's a bit different when you're a child. You don't sort of appreciate what the business side of it is and what owning and running a farm is. But yeah, we've had a good go at it and continue to. So yeah, I don't know what else I can say about that. It's really good to be part of a family farm, and I hope that family farming is something that continues to carry on, because they're a really valuable part of Australia's fabric, I reckon.
Great comment, Jamie. Well, for you, what was it like growing up with your brother and sister on woodlands?
Oh, it was great, Hutch. We had a really good upbringing at home, and we spent a lot of time out with mum and dad farming, as Dad said, with the grandparents and both of Granddad's sisters, so my great aunts. We spent a lot of time with them growing up, and they're certainly memories that we'll have with us forever. And yeah, we had a great time, and certainly look forward to what the future holds and what that looks like with my 2 siblings, and certainly looking forward to the opportunities that may arise out of that. So, but yeah, had a lot of fun growing up there.
Thanks, Will. So tell us about Endeavour Wool Exports, and what is it that has you so passionate about this industry?
Yeah, so Endeavour Wool Exports was founded in 2017 by Josh Lamb, Stuart Greenshields and Warwick Eddington. In those 8 years on now, within the first 5 or 6 years, they put themselves in a really, really exciting position, and they were the 2nd largest exporter in the country. We're now exporting around 220,000 bales annually, which is quite an achievement for them in such a small amount of time. And it's been a really exciting period of growth. Throughout that period of time, I found myself in this position through one of the wool brokers, Jeff Stevens, who sells mum and dad's wool. And I pretty much had a week's work experience in Melbourne and absolutely loved everything that was involved with exporting wool and the valuing and especially the sale room itself. So, and that's quite an addictive part of the role. So that's pretty much how I've ended up in my current role. I've been here for about a year and a half, and I'm absolutely loving it. And I love everything that the industry brings.
Thanks, Will. And before we get into your view and your company's view of the wool industry at the moment and predictions, Jamie, what's your read on where you think the wool industry is at broadly, and what are your predictions, for the next 2, 3, 5 years?
Hutch, there's no doubt that the last couple of years have been pretty tough. I mean, we've been, if you look at it realistically in our micron group, so we're super fine wool growing, we've been operating at or below our cost of production, and that's not sustainable. And so decile 2, 3 prices make it pretty hard to operate and continue to run a business. But looking forward, really, really bullish and positive about the market. We're seeing, supply is contracting all the time. Australian wool clippers at a historical low. So sooner or later, the basic rules of supply and demand have got to kick in. And because supply's contracted so much, we're not going to need a huge change in demand to make a big impact on the price we're getting, is my point of view. So there's that side of it. There's all, wool's got some wonderful sustainability credentials. It's environmentally friendly to produce. It's biodegradable. It's got a lot of great characteristics which make it very appealing to the modern consumer, as long as we can sell that story and get it out there.
Thanks, Jamie. So, Will, what's your view on where we're at as an industry, and maybe some stats around current production versus previous? And I might almost hand over for you to give us your read on what you expect to play out for us over the next few years.
Yep. So I suppose if we start on the production side of things, that, as Dad said, that they're at historic lows. Our current forecast for the 25-26 season is 250 million tonnes, and that's down from 280 million, which was the 2024-2025 actual quantities. To try and put that into perspective of where we were at the end of the wool boom in 1990, when we were at 1 million tonnes, is quite hard to believe that the national flock's been able to decrease the way that it has, to be sitting at a quarter of the volume in only a 35 period is extremely concerning, and probably a bit of a show about consumer consumption, I would say, about woolen garments. So to that point, with the production levels so low, it's very hard to see any other outcome but a significant upturn when things do improve. The problem being, over the last couple of years, since March 2023, when the wool market did crash relative to where it was, there was a significant oversupply and not enough demand for the current point in time. Although it's a lot lower from previous years, there was just not enough demand. So what that meant was there was a huge backlog of greasy product in export at that period of time. That eventually has been processed through and is mostly now sitting in top storages, where that sits a lot of mills and other sections of the industry, as they're not able to sell their top on. This is largely because consumers haven't been spending money on woolen products because it is historically a luxury fibre. We expect that as things begin to improve within China and within Europe, that we will see some significant upturn, and when that happens, that will flow on very quickly into the auction rooms, mostly because of the amount of time that it takes to get it from a greasy product to an actual garment is such a long period of time, somewhere between 12 to 18 months. So for them to be able to react to the demand that they will get, they'll have to do it quite swiftly, which will mean there will be a significant increase in the price of wool when that does happen. When that's going to happen, it is quite hard to tell, but there is some good signs, and it's very, very positive at the moment. And I would be very optimistic, especially with the information we're getting out of Europe and out of China at the moment, there's a lot of optimism over there, which we haven't seen out of those export areas for a number of years, at least 2 years, 2.5 years. So for them to have, regain some interest again, I think is a very positive thing, and that certainly excites us as exporters.
Thanks, Will.
Going forward, yeah.
What was behind the lack of demand sort of over the last 4 or 5 years? Did COVID and were there other one-off shocks that have an impact? You meant consumer spending on luxury items were down, but what were some of the things that made the period that we've been through so challenging for the industry?
Certainly, it's hard to blame everything on COVID, but that certainly was one of the main drivers. Freight and export times, trying to ship containers, and just the general global trade was slowed down a lot, and that certainly impacted the wool trade. And just consumer spending was very, very low compared to where it had been historically. And one of the first things that people will look to save money on is luxury items, and especially luxury clothing. So unfortunately in the wool industry, that impacts us straight away. So that's certainly been hindering the market since COVID.
Did that exacerbate the stockpile or the build up of inventory in the system, do you think?
Certainly did. Other countries, major trading partners such as China and the US, are a perfect example of slowing down trade. So with the tariffs that were put on China from the US, that slowed down a lot of the Chinese products trying to get into the US and surrounding areas. So that certainly had a significant impact on their trade over there. That flows on to us.
Yes, Will. What's your read on what you've heard, Jamie? Do you agree with that sentiment? Have you got anything to add?
Yeah, I agree, Hutch. We can't determine what economic activity is going to eventuate, but wool is very, very sensitive to how much consumers in those countries where we sell it into have got to spend on essentially clothing or other woolen products. And wool, it is expensive relative to other textiles, it's expensive to process and it's expensive to manufacture stuff with. So we can't do a great deal on the cost side of that. Well, certainly as growers, we can't do anything about it, but it is in that niche market. And so it's very, very sensitive to what the economic climate is. And if people aren't spending money, as Will said, they're not going to buy a new jumper or a new suit or they'll go and buy a polyester one that'll last them a few months and then throw it out and buy another one.
Jamie, what have you done differently? Are you looking at, or have you looked at different ways to market your wool over the last few years? And has that changed how you go to market?
We've been doing the same thing with our wool for a number of years, Hutch. We've been dealing direct with the exporter, which has worked really well for us. Sometimes they've been able to fit it into orders they've already got, so that works really well. Other times we've had to send some to auction, which they facilitate. So that's basically how we've been marketing our wool and dealing direct with the exporter, not through an agent. We're getting it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. That if they think we should present the clip in a certain way or prepare it in a certain way or concentrate on, this aspect, or whether it's pulling out grass seed or avoiding colour in the fleece line or whatever it is, or if there's no benefit in doing any of that, they'll tell us that as well. So, yeah, so dealing direct with an exporter it suits us, and we think we get very good advice from them. The trick for us is to try and grow as much of it as we can, as cheaply as we can, Hutch, and that's not always easy either when you're subject to the weather and the growing season and all that normal sort of stuff that goes with agriculture, but that's what we're trying to do. So we've probably concentrated more on our breeding than we have on our marketing of our clip, because we're reasonably happy that how we're marketing it is working.
So how have you navigated these last few years of decile 2 and 3 prices, Jamie? Have you lent on other enterprises? Have you sort of pivoted more to a first cross more than you otherwise would? What have you done to sort of get through as a business?
Well, if we step back to 2019, Hutch, we came out of that 3-year drought period with 6,000 sheep left on this place, and that was it. We went at the end of 2016, I think we had about 12,000 sheep and 500 cows on here. That was a pretty big step down, but, we had to do what we had to do to survive. We then decided we were going to concentrate on the wool growing enterprise, because that's the one that it's well suited to this place. It's what we like doing, and that's the track we went down. So we made that commitment to grow that wool enterprise back to where it was and beyond. We've made big inroads there, but obviously building up numbers takes time. So we used a lot of agistment cattle on the place to help pay the bills and generate an income for those few years while we were starting to build the merino flock back up. And we did, or have been, joining a portion of our ewes to a Border Leicester for the prime lamb market. We're actually phasing that side of the enterprise out, and we're just going to concentrate wholly and solely on a straight merino enterprise. And we reckon that's that's an easier enterprise to scale moving forward. So that's where we're headed.
And what's the ideal flock size for Woodlands, in your opinion, Jamie?
Well, my goal is to shear 20,000 sheep before I step aside. So we've got about 15,500 sheep and lambs on at the moment. We won't shear all them next year, but so we're getting there, Hutch. This is a 35,000 DSE place with further development. That's our goal. So there's plenty of scope for improvement yet. We're running about just over 20,000 now, so we're still growing.
Well done. Thanks, Jamie. And as you say, you focused a lot in on breeding and the genetic makeup of your flock. Would you mind speaking to that?
Yeah, sure. So in 2018, we had our first benchmarking debrief with Greg. We talked about a lot of things, and sheep genetics we didn't actually talk much about figures because we didn't have any, because we're in the middle of a raging drought. So we talked more about sheep and flock structure and genetic selection, sheep and all that sort of thing. The result of that was I went away and researched merino genetics, looking for, genetics that we thought would improve our flock and work towards, the increasing fleece weight and reducing micron that we were aiming for. DPI put out a report of merino bloodlines from weather trials over a period of, I think, 10 or 12 years. And I went to that report and I found a couple of studs. One was local in the New England, one was at Cooma. We started buying some rams from both those places, and then we recording all their progeny, fleece weights, micron, and we're noticing some real gains in those areas. But it takes a long time, Hutch. It takes sort of a genetic change takes about 6 years before you even start to see the results. So it's a slow burn, but it's well worth the effort. So yeah, we started looking at ASBVs and using that genetic information to really drive the improvement in the flock, and it's made a big difference.
What are the key objectives that you're aiming for, Jamie?
Well, we're trying to maximise our fleece weight per head, and we want to sit around that 15 micron sort of area. So that'll give us a good amount of wool in the sort of 14 micron area in young sheep, and then if we can average 15 micron, we're going to be pretty happy with that. And then just try and maximise or optimise our clean fleece weight per hectare. So obviously each individual animal has to have the best genetic potential at growing wool as it can. So that's we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. We're just trying to put a better tyre on the one we've got. So yeah, it's got its challenges, Hutch. I mean, you if you're strong, select for something, you might be at the expense of something else. So it's a real balancing act, but we're seeing it pay dividends. So yeah.
Thanks, Jamie. Well, you've seen Woodlands navigate an enduring and long drought and now a period of low prices. What do you admire most about what Jamie and Ange have achieved sort of over the last 10 or 15 years?
Certainly, since that most recent drought in 2017, resilience is certainly a word that comes to mind. I would hate to have been in my parents' shoes to have persevered throughout that drought, and to have been able to come out of it, I think, has quite an achievement. It would have been quite easy after that to say it's too hard and I can't continue. But I think to see where they've been able to take the enterprise to now is that they should be very proud of where they're at now and where they're looking to direct the business towards. And I'm also very excited to be part of the future there and the direction that they're wanting to take the sheep at home, and certainly most excited at the fact that it will be solely merinos.
Well done. Jamie, you joined Farm Owners Academy, which we're delighted about. It's been great having you part of our community and having you and Ange now members of our alumni. And I think you joined us at what was a pretty challenging time. As you say, you've coming out of a drought into a period of decile 2 and 3 prices. How's the FOA project, the team and the community supported you and Ange?
Hutch, it's been a fantastic thing we found. I was sitting here one night, it was in 2018, I think, and I came across this bloke, Andrew Roberts, talking about a program called Take Control, and it was an online little thing, and we went through these modules, and I thought, that sounds all right. And then took us to an event in Canberra, which I think might have been your first one as well, or close to it. And then we really liked what the program had to offer and the people involved, and so on the way home, Ange and I decided we'd join up and give it a crack. It's an amazing organisation to be part of. You know, the people that work in the organisation, it's an incredible team, and the support they give to farming families across Australia and the wider, even overseas, is fantastic. And the community itself, Hutch, is incredible. Like you don't get that sort of community anywhere else that I know of. And from our involvement, we've got really good clarity about where we sit currently and then where we want to head. So that's a massive thing. Rather than just going out and doing the daily grind, you've actually got a really good purpose and some goals that you're heading towards. So that's been a really positive part of it for us.
Thanks, Jamie. And Will, I'm pleased that you mentioned resilience, because I think, to your point, I think what we've observed is just Jamie and Ange have just lent in and achieved so much for the business and for the family. And we've really valued having you part of our community, Jamie. So thank you for that. Will, coming back to the global markets, would you mind just giving us your insight as to what's playing out in terms of demand through China and Europe?
Certainly. If we're looking at China at the moment and the sort of levels that we have been exporting over there and other exporters within the country, the volumes we've been sending there have been far below average, and a lot of those mills over there are running sort of between 50 and 70% at best of their optimum capacity. So if we look at that comparison of where they ideally would like to be, it's obviously far below where they want to be, and their throughput is a lot lower. As a result of that, they've been looking to process lower value wool to continue production and operations within some of their mills. They also have employees and a company that needs to be run, and they've been looking to do that with as low as risk as they've been able to possibly do. That has been seen certainly over the last few years with some of the larger mills throughout China and Europe operating at very, very low levels. So as a result, they will have to buy wool again. And when things do improve, they're going to want to buy it in a substantial quantities of wool at one period of time. Problem is when they go to do that, and when things do improve, the volumes that were there in the past are not there anymore. Obviously, this will create quite a price pinch, and that's when we're hoping we'll see a big increase in the price of wool. In Europe, things are also not great. Europe as an economy is not running very well. Their production capacities are also running probably at around 50% at best. A lot of the suit making coming out of Italy has been very low. So again, once things improve, they'll also be looking to buy more wool. We need Europe to be putting pressure on China, especially in the more European spec wool, to create more price pressure, and that will translate through to the auction room. Until that happens, China really have a monopoly market at the moment. Last year, their consumption of Australian wool was actually up, which is not good for the market, because we ideally want their consumption percentage to be going down, spreading the risk within the market. And that's just a showing of the times in Europe at the moment. If you look at coming out of COVID, Europe was having some of the best years that they've had in a long time. The Trump tariffs on China were meaning that production in Europe was at an all-time high, to a point where they were actually looking to build an additional mill over there to try and deal with the amount of quantity that they were trying to put through those mills. Unfortunately, that didn't occur. What happened after that period of time was, in start of 2023, as I commented on before, they probably didn't see a few of the market signs that we were seeing back here in the export side. Things were starting to look a little bit wobbly, and I'd say most of Europe probably overbought, which just means they've been a lot more timid to come back into the market 2.5 years down the track. This will obviously improve because they need to increase production again. They can't be running it at 50%. It's not viable for them, and it's not viable for anyone else. And then that brings us around to India as a market. They have said that they want to be going toe to toe with China, but they're probably about 10 or more years behind. They will say that they want to be competing with China on a global stage, but continue to want to buy the same wool for $1 cheaper. So there's continuous export struggles there. But we do think that this will improve going forward in the near future, because India are also running it at all-time production lows. They have large mills over there that need volume to stay open. So interesting 6 months ahead we have. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what do you think the pricing might look like over the next sort of 1 or 2 years? Do you guys have a sense on when things might correct, or do you hesitate to suggest?
I'll give you a very optimistic opinion on what I think is going to happen. Global consumption of wool as a product is probably as good as it's been. People are becoming more aware about what they're wearing and what they're wanting to purchase. In the shop front, they're looking for sustainable products and products that are environmentally friendly. Wool is certainly at the forefront of this consumer perception, and we do predict that this will translate into real dollar value back to the farmer. What we think over the next 5 years will be a rebuild stage, probably for the whole Australian merino flock and sheep flock in general. We've got a long way to come back to some more sustainable production levels, but it will be quite difficult to get a gauge on the true market over the next couple of years. Certainly over the next sort of 3 to 6 months, we'll have a very good gauge on whether wool is going to have a real upturn. We need to see much higher sustained prices within the next year, because of the number of farmers that are going out of merinos, and this it's quite a difficult thing to get across to mills and clients overseas, but trying to say, look, you need to be doing more to try and market these products. They just don't seem to understand that farmers are going out of merinos altogether, and just presume that when they decide to buy again, that the volume's going to be there. Unfortunately, that won't be the case, but certainly think there'll be a big upturn within the next 6 months. Probably more so on the superfine end, only because there's more room for that part of the market to move. If you have a look at most of the superfines between 15 to 17, 18 microns, they're on the finer end, they're well below half their true value. So there's a huge amount of room for that part of the market to shift. And if we look at only a few years ago when we had the 19 to 22 micron area back up over 1,800 cents for the broader end, that also has a lot of room to move. The price levels that we're seeing at the moment can't be sustained and won't be sustained within the mills, because although farmers are getting low prices, it's tight on the export side, and it's also tight for the mills in China and in Europe. They also need the price of wool to increase so that there can be larger margins within each step. And we're hoping and very, very hopeful that will happen within the next 6 months. And I think there's a lot of information to suggest that will happen, and that there's a very high chance. I can't say with absolute certainty that will happen, but I'm extremely hopeful and can't see many reasons as to why it will not.
Thanks, Will. Great comments. Jamie, what's your read? And second question to that, what do you think we can do better as an industry to make sure that we're more actively driving the demand side of the ledger?
I certainly hope he's right, Hutch. That's the first comment. What we can do better as an industry is sell our story better. And, we do, AWI puts a lot of effort into marketing, and you can argue either way as to how effective that is. But I probably don't want to, but I have to bring up the mulesing issue because it's a big cloud that's hanging over the industry, and until it's resolved, I think it's going to hold us back. This debate around mulesing's been here as long as I've been involved in the industry, and that might only be 30 years, but that's probably long enough. We probably should have done more about it in that time. And the argument isn't whether mulesing works or not. We know it works. The argument is around whether it's an acceptable practice to the ultimate end user of our products. And clearly it's not. You can't say it any other way. I mean, consumers are becoming more aware about how everything is produced, and if that's part of the story, it's pretty easy to see why they don't like it. So I think that's an issue that at an industry level needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed really promptly. And we haven't mulesed a sheep here for 15 or 18 years. We've learnt to deal with it. I'm not the smartest bloke in the world. If I can do it, anyone can. It's not rocket science, and there's plenty of alternative methods to control fly strike in sheep. And the obvious long-term one is breeding, but there are other, there's chemical controls to reduce fly strike, which are pretty environmentally friendly to use as well. We just have to get it sorted out, and it's probably going to take government legislation for that to happen. It'll be pretty unpopular. It might well be what makes the wool industry survive.
Will, what's your view on that issue, and what do you think we need to do better as an industry to make sure we're doing our bit to drive the demand side? From
an exporter's point of view, there's no doubt that we have been time and time again being asked for non-mules wool, and there's no doubt that is the direction that consumers are heading. It will need a unified approach for the whole industry moving forward, that will have to accept that the practices that we are doing on farm, that is a separate issue. What we're hearing from the end consumer is what dictates price at the end of the day. So to ignore that, you're only doing yourself a disservice. Mulesing numbers are decreasing annually, very slowly, but they are decreasing. Accreditation scheme numbers are increasing, similarly, very slowly. But there's no doubt that there are premiums associated with marketing your wool and being non-mulesed. More dramatic premiums for accredited farms through RWS. But outside of that, we need to have an industry stance on the direction that we're going to move in. And unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen overnight. That will take quite some time. I think I'll leave that there.
Good comment, Will. Thank you. Appreciate both of your sentiments there. And it does seem like it's a distraction away from us getting on and doing our marketing better. And Jamie, interesting to hear your comment on perhaps requiring a legislative change more so than anything else. Will, would you mind just telling us a bit about the Endeavour Wool business and how can people best get in touch with you?
So the main makeup of the business is by buying and trading wool through the auction system. That would equate for probably not 90% of the business model. Outside of the exporting side, we offer a direct to farm or direct to export service, whereby we'll buy the wool straight off farm. That'll comes into our store located in Melbourne or in Hamilton, 2 stores, and we'll test it there, put a valuation on there, and then we'll, if we see fit to it, we can either offer prices direct to the farmer, avoiding the brokerage side of things, therefore avoiding the brokerage commission. And if that isn't possible, or if we think that you'll get more higher value for your wool, we will recommend sending it through to auction through our services as well. And that's also down in Melbourne. So if people are wanting to get in contact, they can either do that via the website, Endeavour Wool Exports. It'll be the top link when you search that up. I'll also make sure to include the link in the bio and the contact information there.
Thanks, Will. Yeah, we'll absolutely include your details in the show notes. Jamie, how's Endeavour Wool supported Woodlands over the years?
Oh, well, they've been really good, Hutch, with particularly advice on, obviously, clip preparation is a big part of the wool growing operation, but also advice on, whether we should sell it or whether we should hold it and wait for a while. So that's been good. Everything about it's good, Hutch. The payment is almost instantaneous, so that's often very handy and just really, really good company to deal with. And who knows what the future holds. I mean, I'd really like to think down the track we might be able to be a preferred supplier of wool into a processor or a manufacturer. And if we could facilitate something like that through Endeavour, that'd be a great outcome. I think we've got a pretty good story to tell and a long involvement in the industry, and maybe there's possibilities down that avenue. So that's something we're starting to look into. You do cut out the middleman a bit. You're not paying commissions and all that sort of stuff to a broker. So that's attractive to me anyway.
If you can, set up that more direct marketing avenue.
Yep.
Will, just to round this out, you're off on a few weeks to China for a study tour shortly. What do you hope to achieve and what will you see over there?
Yeah, I'm Hutch. It'll be a fantastic networking trip. There's 10 of us heading over. Myself as an exporter, there's a young broker, and the balance is made up of young farmers. We'll be visiting some of the largest mills in the country and some mills that have had a very long history of processing Australian wool. It'll be great to get a bit of an insight on the ground as to what's actually happening in China. Things get a bit lost in translation between agents that are used over there and what we're actually hearing things are like over there. So it's much better to get an on the ground feel for what's happening in the industry. That can often be completely different to the information that we're getting. So it's really important to get over there and see what's actually happening. And it'll be an amazing trip, and it'll be great to get over there and see how some of those mills over there, the directions that they're taking and the measures that they're going towards to ensure that they've also got a long life within the industry.
Yep. Thanks, Will. Appreciate it. And Jamie, last question for you. How does a family celebrate 150 years of farming? Just keen to understand what the celebration is going to look like for you and your extended family.
I don't think we'll get a letter from the King, but you never know. We're having a bit of a celebration in the shearing shed, Hutch, and I think there might be a couple of hundred people come along who've been involved with us as a family or have worked here or neighbours or in the district, and it'll just be like a big birthday party, I suppose. And then yeah, it'll be back to business as usual, ready for the next 50 years, and someone else can worry about 200.
What are you most proud of, Jamie, as you reflect on your career and your extended and that long history within your family? What are you and Ange most proud of?
I think we're most proud of the fact that our kids are taking such an interest in it as well. And there's never been any pressure from us to say that just because we've done it doesn't mean you have to do it. But they've just, naturally become really interested in the property and the operation of it, and what we do and why we do it. And that's, sheep work isn't always all that enjoyable, but it's just part and parcel of what we do. And the fact that they're interested, I think, is something we're really proud of. We've enjoyed doing it, Hutch. I mean, it's a hard slog sometimes, but that's agriculture in Australia, really, isn't it?
I think it is at times, Jamie, but especially given the drought that you've navigated and this period of low prices. So hopefully on both fronts you can see both those levers change for the better in the next few years. And as I said before, it's just been great to be a small part of that journey and to support you and Ange and your family more recently. Will, thank you so much for those insights, mate. It's great to connect with you and to get your expert analytic view of the wool industry and what it means for farming families, and great to see and hear your optimism about wool prices and demand over the next few years, but really appreciate your time.
All right, Hutch, thanks for having me on.
Pleasure, Will. Thank you. And thanks again, Jamie, to you and Ange. Yeah, we'll look forward to seeing some stronger prices come through in years to come.
Yeah, thanks very much, Hutch, for having us on, and it's been great to chat.
Thanks to you both. Speak soon. And there you have it, folks. Really interesting to reflect on 150 years as one family on Woodlands. So again, congratulations, Jamie and Ange, for your part in that and your successful career on farm at Woodlands. And thank you to you both for your sentiment, for your optimism, for your outlook. Will, great to hear about what's happening within and across our major trading partners, to touch on the mulesing debate, tariffs, and pleasing to hear that you have an optimistic outlook for the wool industry. I hope you're right, and I hope that many of our growers in Australia stay with wool and get to enjoy a change in pricing outlook as we move forward. Thanks, everyone. Speak again soon. So about 10 days after our interview proper, Will went to China on a wool trip. Will, how was it?
Yeah, it was fantastic, Hutch. There was a group of 10 of us, 8 young growers, 2 of which were in the trade. So I was there as a young exporter, and there was a young broker on the trip as well. And it was essentially a group of young people keen on the industry, touring around China, looking at wool processing mills. So from the raw product going in, and then we were being able to see wool heading through the entire supply chain and into the garments coming out the other ends. It was a great insight into the industry and fantastic to be a part of that trip. So very lucky to have gone on that.
It's great to catch up with you again, Will. Prices have rallied, which is really encouraging. What are some of the key reflections or insights that you got from that time in China?
Certainly something I think as a group that we're all excited to see was the amount of investment from these Chinese companies. They're investing a significant amount of money into their mills to upgrade them and also increase production. So that was a really telling thing for us as young groups and young participants in the industry, seeing that there is certainly going to be a positive future for the wool industry. And it was probably very reassuring as well for some of us, probably not so much some of the people who are on the trip, but certainly for other people in the industry who might be on the fence about what's best for their own operations. But certainly for us as young producers, it was very reassuring to see the investments they're making in the sector.
Can you give us an insight as to what magnitude? Like, it's really positive, isn't it, that one of our major trading partners is investing intently in processing?
a lot of the mills that we visited are wanting to increase production, say by 10 or 20%. Some of these mills are significantly large. One of the mills we visited, TR New, they import around 130,000 bales of Australian wool annually. So that's quite a significant portion of our wool clip, and they're continually investing in efficiencies and upgrading machinery. Some of the other mills that we visited, they're now importing Swiss spinning machinery, which is extremely expensive and state-of-the-art. So that's certainly a telling factor about the direction that they're wanting to head into, certainly wanting to enter more into the European market. And to do that, they need to have better machinery, and they're happy to invest into that to ensure that they can enter into that market.
Will, tell us about the conference that you attended, and also, if you could, I understand you got to advocate for wool growers in Australia directly with some of the key decision makers across the processes in China. What was your message?
So the conference we attended during the trip was the Nanjing Wool Market Conference. So it's essentially an international wool conference that involves all parties within the sector. We had Europeans, South Africans, New Zealanders. It was everyone you could think of was there, and the conference consists of forums throughout 2 days, and varying from production issues to issues that they're seeing in the top making and spinning, and what's happening in terms of sustainability, etc. And it was a great opportunity for us to be able to explain to other people within the sector what's happening to the production within Australia. We were able to highlight how much it's drastically decreasing, and we were able to try and put it into perspective for them. They are wool producing factories, and they can only process wool. And our message to them was, you need to understand that we're not just running sheep in the paddock anymore. Farmers are benchmarking their sheep enterprises against cattle production and also against cropping. So if the wool market is in a difficult situation where it has been for the last 2 years, and there's more attractive opportunities elsewhere, people may be inclined to go away from it. So you need to be prepared that the production may continue to decrease unless you're prepared to do something about the price of wool. So certainly a message that was reiterated repetitively throughout this conference was you need to have a serious think about your marketing for garments and what you're doing in the processing stage, because we're in a very sticky situation, and they need to be spending a considerable amount of time working out what they're going to do to rectify this issue that we're having at the moment.
Well done, Will. And how confident are you that they got the message?
Oh, very, very. Whether it was from the conference or there was genuine demand and sales after the conference, but yeah, certainly the week following that's when we saw the spike in the wool market, so began to rally. So I don't think that was purely on the back of just the conference and the message that was being sent from there, but I'd certainly say it was part of the reason.
It's significant to hear that, and I think it's really positive for our listeners to hear that message has been heard. How much more confident are you today than perhaps you were 3 or 4 weeks ago when we first spoke, Will, about our outlook? Has that trip just given you, seeing that investment in wool processing, knowing that those conversations are being heard, how's that impacted you as a young businessman in the wool industry?
Oh, I think it's pretty hard to compare my perspectives before the trip and after the trip. It was just, amazing and very reassuring to see that investment on such a wide scale. And very, very hard to compare. It's completely changed my point of view. I was already a passionate young wool grower and advocate for the industry beforehand, but even more so now post the trip. And it's encouraged me to try and educate more young people, and not necessarily just young people, but everyone involved in the industry, that there is certainly a positive outlook for wool in general and production in Australia.
So, Will, in wrapping up this podcast and having been to China and had that real shift in perspective. What's the new message that you'd like for Australian wool growers to hear?
I would just say to want to learn more about what happens to your wool post-farm. I had very little, before I started my current role, I had very little understanding of what actually happened once the wool left the shed. And it's a very long supply chain, and I would guarantee that there is a lot of people that probably don't understand the full extent about how long it takes for wool to actually be processed. I would say that's probably certainly a message that I'd like to deliver, would be to try and have more of an understanding about what happens after your wool and where the real value is in differing qualities and why you're receiving the prices that you are.
And maybe if we come together and talk to the right people and help them understand that maybe we can impact price and impact supply chains for the better for the long term.
Certainly. We have a fantastic story to tell. It's an unbelievable product, and it's always very difficult to understand that it's selling for the prices that it is, because it's extremely valuable. It's hard to compare against cotton and even other products, but more specifically synthetics in general. And why it's not selling itself off the shelves is a frustrating challenge that we have in the industry, certainly, and something that we'll be working hard to try and change the perspective that people have on wool.
Well done, Will, on that trip. Thank you for advocating for Australian wool growers in China, and great to connect again, mate, just to hear a bit about your time overseas.
Thanks very much, Hutch.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Profitable Farmer podcast by Farm Owners Academy. If you're new to this show, be sure to follow us. If you've been a long-time listener, let your friends know about us, or come continue the conversation in the Profitable Farmer Facebook group. All the best as you grow your business and create your freedom farm. Until next time, keep being incredible.